Now let's discuss turn probes. You may ask, what is a probe? A probe is a bet made after the preflop aggressor checked behind on the flop. Okay? So this is a scenario where someone raises, let's say big blind calls. Then big blind checks the flop. Initial raiser checks behind. Okay? Turn comes. And now it is on the big blind. And they are opting to bet. This would be a probe. It's important to realize that you, out of position, still have 100% of your pre-flop range because you will check everything on the flop. Therefore, you still have everything, right? Also, what happens to your opponent's range when they check behind on the flop? Well, they probably don't have their best hands in their draws, right? Usually their range is going to be much more condensed, meaning it has a lot of marginal made hands and some junk, okay? Always make sure you compare your full range, because you have 100% of your pre-flop range, to your opponent's range that checked behind on the flop, not to their range that made it to the flop total or to their pre-flop range. That's a mistake a lot of people make. Always make sure you understand the range you have and the range your opponent has at this particular point. All right. An out-of-position caller will often have the range disadvantage even after it goes check-check on the flop. However, the extent of the range disadvantage can vary. So let's consider two main factors when deciding if you should make a probe bet. First, do you have a strong or weak flop range disadvantage? So take a board like Queen 10-7, right? Whenever your opponent checks behind on Queen 10-7, they're probably going to have a whole lot of hands like weak queens and 10s and 7s. It's actually a pretty strong range, right? So therefore you, with your entire big blind calling range, are going to have a strong disadvantage, right? You're in a bad shape on that board, even when it goes check-check. Next, what about if it is 9-7-5? Well, now when your opponent's checking this flop, they're going to check this flop pretty frequently in position, right? And you, as the player in the big blind, actually have a decent amount of pretty good hands here, which means that you are going to be disadvantaged because they're still checking back with some 7s and 5s and whatnot, but you're not going to be at a huge disadvantage. Okay? That's factor number one. Factor number two is, do you get a good turn card or a bad turn card for you, right? Say the turn card is a overcard, like a king. Like say the flop comes Queen 10-7, it goes check-check, turns a king. This card is very, very bad for out of position because the in-position player is going to check behind with a lot of random king-high type hands that this connects really, really well with, right? So this is a bad card. Whereas if it's a 6, like say the board is 9-7-5, turns a 6, this is great for the out-of-position player because they're going to have lots of straights, right? Let's say on 9-7-5 that turns an ace, that would then be a bad card for out-of-position, okay? So the worse these two factors are for out-of-position, the less often they should be betting, right? Because if it's a bad spot for them, they should be betting less often. And when you're betting less often, you are going to be betting very, very polarized, right? So when you are betting in a scenario where you don't really have much of a range advantage, you're often going to want to be betting using a big size, often overbetting. And the better these two factors are for the out-of-position player, like say it's a low connected board, so they have a weak range disadvantage, and also they get a good card on the turn, now they're going to be betting often using a small size. And in this scenario, we have a flow chart for you. Use the turn probe flow chart. Let's go through it very quickly. Out-of-position range disadvantage. Are you heavily disadvantaged? Or do you have just a little bit of a disadvantage? When you have a big disadvantage and you get a bad turn card, you're going to rarely bet, but when you do bet, you're going to be betting really big if you get a bad turn card. Like right here, if you wanted to bet when you have like a straight or something, you should be betting using a big size because your opponent's going to have a lot of hands that will stick around, right? When you have a weak disadvantage, you're going to be betting rarely as well when you get a bad turn card, but you're going to be betting a little bit smaller, and that's because the ranges are typically a little bit closer. Now, if you get a good turn card, but you're still on a pretty bad board, you're going to want to be betting a little bit more often again using a big bet size. And if you have very little range disadvantage here and you get a good card for you, now you're going to be betting very, very frequently using a small size. We're going to use this flow chart as we go through some examples.